have the Nikon D750, and we're just going to do a quick overview of the camera here, discuss some of the features and functions of the camera, just to get you acquainted with it. The first thing you'll probably look at the top of the camera here, well, we'll have the on-off switch. When you turn that on, top LCD comes on, showing you important shooting information like shutter speed, aperture, the set ISO, your shots remaining on your active card, your battery life, and your metering mode. You'll also see here is the shutter speed scale. That depends on your shooting mode. That will not always be displayed. Also here we have the option to turn on the backlight for the top LCD, which is only vaguely going to show up here, but it's there. And you have your exposure compensation, which allows +5 to -5 exposure compensation, so it's pretty flexible in that regard, just like the higher end Nikon bodies. You have the movie recording button, which I currently have programmed to control my ISO settings. This is a menu option. Then you have your metering mode selector, which allows you to cycle between matrix, center weighted, spot, and highlight weighted metering modes. On the other side of the top here we have the mode dial, which allows you to choose between the different user programmable modes, effects, scene modes, flash disabled, full auto, auto with auto pop-up flash, program auto, which also automatically pops up the flash, shutter priority, where you set the shutter speed only and the camera does the rest, aperture priority, where you just set the aperture and the camera figures out the shutter speed, and full manual. Personally, I tend to use the user modes, which give you versatility in terms of you can set whatever one of these shooting modes you want, any one of them, program it in. You can have default shutter speed, aperture, all those things all programmed in, and the camera will be ready to go. Of course, underneath the cover here we have the standard Nikon flash hot shoe. This is the Nikon BS2 cover. It's originally designed to fit the D3, the D3S, D4, blah blah blah. But it also fits on many other Nikon DSLRs. I like it because it removes the reflectiveness of the flash hot shoe. On the front of the camera, you'll see there are a number of buttons. We have the flash release. That will pop up the flash. Obviously it won't pop up right now. It also operates as flash exposure compensation if it's popped up. You'll see when you, let's get that out of the way. When you push the button when the flash is popped up, it allows you to change your flash mode between normal flash, flash with red eye, or rear sync, or flash disabled. You can also set your exposure compensation here on the top. It's just +1 and -3 comp. Just probably so you don't burn out the battery. Next up, on the front of the body we have the bracketing button. When you press the bracketing button, it will bring up, sorry, wrong one. It'll bring up the bracketing settings, so you can change that. You can change the number of stops that will be bracketed and the number of frames, which can go all the way up to 9. All this information is also shown on the front panel. Now the number of frames you can take depends on the number of shots you choose. If you choose more than 2 stops or 3 stops, you're limited to 5 frames. So you just have to keep that in mind. Okie dokie. Next we have the autofocus on switch down here. Right here, this one switches the camera to manual for older D series lenses like this one here. If you do not flip that switch to manual when you're using older lenses, it will damage the focus motor in the lens and possibly the gears in the camera. With that on, and you press this button, it will bring up your shooting information on the top, so things like whether it's in single mode, continuous mode, or auto mode, where it will determine the type of autofocus it wants to do. On the other side of the front we have the preview button, which by default operates as a depth of field preview button. I don't have it programmed to do that, but that's what it does by default. And then you also have the dedicated function button down here, which has an odd placement. I kind of wish it was over here, more like the other bodies, but for some reason they've decided to tuck it down under the lens mount here, which makes it a little bit awkward to use with larger lenses, but it is what it is. Also here on the front we have, and I forgot to mention before, this is the forward-facing sensor for the ML-L3 or compatible infrared remote. There's another sensor for that on the back, which is located right here, I believe. Anyways, moving on, we have the autofocus assist beam here. Then we have the sub command dial here. Moving on to this side of the camera, you'll find your SD card slots. You can see I've got them loaded up with some Lexar 633X cards here. I've got them set to overflow. Anyways, moving on to the ports on the other side of the camera, you see we have a socket for a wired remote or the compatible GPS. Down here we have mic and headphone jacks for video recording. And right here we have a USB 2 and HDMI. I believe that's a mini HDMI port. Up here, just below the mode dial, we have a dial for your drive mode, so single frame, continuous frame low, continuous frame high, quiet, and then we also have quiet continuous. We have timer, self-timer release, and mirror lockup. Now mirror lockup can be used one of two ways. Either you can use it to slightly delay the release of the shutter, or you can let it run through its whole course. It will automatically take a picture after 30 seconds. So that's kind of the primary functions. Up here we have the Doppler adjuster for the optical viewfinder, which by the way provides 100% coverage of the frame in regular mode. So yeah, in crop mode you can also have different frame lines in there depending on your settings. Anyways, moving on to the back of the body here, we have more buttons. We have the playback button, which obviously plays back the most recent image. You have the trash button. Yeah, we're not going to do that. Okay, then we have the menu button that brings up your main menu system. I have it by default set to go to my menu with common settings that I use. Your next button here is your white balance. When you press the white balance button, it brings up this on the back LCD, and similar information on the top. So when you rotate the dial, it changes white balance settings. The next button is your quality control, which allows you to choose between RAW and JPEG stuff. I just leave it in RAW. Next one, you have your ISO again, like I was showing before. And then finally we have this info panel. It allows you to choose things like your crop mode. You can change picture controls, D-lighting, whether the sensor for the wireless remote is on or off. Allows you to assign the function and preview buttons, and the autofocus and auto exposure lock button. You can also turn on or off long exposure noise reduction or high ISO noise reduction. And then we come to the basic rear screen information here. We'll get back to that in a minute. That turns on with the info button. Shows your battery information, your shutter speed, aperture, ISO, whether it's auto or not. Your frame mode, which in this case is FX, if it's in DX or other crop mode. Then you got your autofocus mode, D-lighting settings, your picture control, auto white balance, whether HDR mode is on or off. Why on earth they have that there, I don't know. You have your autofocus mode. Here we have the card information, so which card is active, whether both slots are full, whether you're shooting RAW or JPEG or various other settings. Here it shows that you've got copyright. Here it shows you've got copyright information displayed, that you have a comment, the number of frames remaining, and it tells you what the various function buttons are programmed to do. Below that we have the D-pad here. That's more than a D-pad, but similar. And when you move that around, it allows you to choose the various and sundry focus points, or when you're viewing images to rotate through them, etc., etc. The OK button will bring that up. When you're in playback mode, it'll zoom in on the picture in question if you set it to. That's what I have it set to do. This button right here locks your selected focus point. So if you find you're bumping your focus point away from where you want it, you can just flip that little switch. Here we have your live view control. Pressing the info button rotates through your various settings. Everything is there. You can also switch to movie live view, which shows you the correct framing for video recording, as well as other important shooting information. Moving on to the bottom of the camera, you can see, well, normally you'd be able to see there's a standard tripod socket there. I have Arca Swiss compatible quick release plate on there right now. On the bottom we also have the battery, which is the ENEL15. Underneath here we have a socket for the MBD16 battery grip, which I don't have. The last kind of thing I wanted to point out is the wonderful flipping LCD. Okay, I said that kind of sarcastically, but it's actually not that bad. It is quite useful for angle shots. Like say you want to shoot a flower or something like that, and you simply can't see it, you know, without crawling in the mud. Well, you don't always want to crawl in the mud, let's be honest. You may not be dressed for it. So you can just switch to live view and put the camera like this and shoot. Or if there's something above you that you can't possibly even hope to get with the just point and shoot with the viewfinder not visible, you know, you can use that to get that. Otherwise, that, you know, pretty much covers all the basics of the camera. The only thing I haven't really talked about is the lens release, and that one's kind of an obvious. You know, you just twist one way to take it off, the other way to put it on, boom, done. You know, you're buying a camera this price range, you probably already know how to mount and unmount an f-mount lens on a Nikon body, so there you go. I'll just show you the noise here created by autofocusing a D series lens on the body. Hold on a second. I'll just have to reset focus here. That's pretty much what it sounds like, at least with this particular lens. It's a little bit higher pitched than some of the other bodies, but that might be due to the body construction of the D750 itself, which is a mix of metal and polycarbonate, so versus the cameras I'm used to, like the D300 and the D700 and D800, which have a full magnesium alloy chassis, which might have dampened the noise a little more than the carbon fiber infused plastics in the front of the D750, I'm not sure. Or it might just be a different motor that makes more noise. So now we're just going to do a quick walkthrough of the menu system on the D750. First we have the playback menu, which gives you basic information that you can set up for playing back your images with the playback button. You can delete multiple images, name the playback folder. You can hide particular images if you don't want them to be seen for some reason. You can set up playback display options, as seen here. After that we have the photo shooting menu, which has a vast array of settings. Honestly, I'm not going to go through them all. We're just going to slowly cycle through here so you can kind of see some of the settings that are available here. Next we have the movie shooting menu, which is new to the D750. This one gives you the ability to set movie-specific settings quickly and easily without having to dig through the next menu, which we'll cover on in a second, which previous Nikon bodies have forced you to do. Next we have the custom settings menu, which has all your autofocus settings, your metering and exposure settings, your self-timers, all kinds of things like setting how long the meter is active, how long the screen will stay on under various conditions, etc. The next one we have your shooting and display information. So you kind of have things like the camera beep, continuous low shooting speed. You have the exposure delay mode here, which is useful for various situations like shorter exposures but not long exposures where you might actually need mirror lockup, for example. You can set up to turn the grid on or off in the viewfinder, etc. Then we have bracketing and flash settings. So you can set the flashing speed for an external flash and the built-in flash. The controls for the built-in flash, such as TTL, manual, repeating, and commander mode, which allows you to control external flash guns. That's basically it for that. Next we have, you can actually set what various buttons on the camera do, like the function button, the auto exposure lock button, preview button, movie record button, all kinds of stuff like that. There are a few movie settings here. Why they're still here, I'm not 100% sure, but it's partially because they are assigning what the function buttons do in movie mode. To me, it would have made sense to put those in the movie settings bank, but hey, I'm not Nikon. Then we have the setup menu, which allows you to set up the memory cards. So if you put in new memory cards, you can format them for the camera. You can save your user settings, which I mentioned on the top of the camera earlier. There are two banks, and you can choose any particular settings and save them to those banks. Here you set your monitor brightness, mirror lockup for cleaning. You set your time zone. You can turn daylight saving time on and off. Auto image rotation, which is useful so you don't have to rotate them later in software. And you have battery information. It's quite a detailed list here. You have your percentage charge, number of shots per charge, and the current life status of the battery. You can turn on image comments. You can set up copyright information. And then you can save various settings. You can turn on your virtual horizon. You can set up non-CPU lens data. This is for old manual focus lenses that don't have digital information stored in them. You can set autofocus fine-tuned. I can't say I've had to use that on this particular camera. I have had to use it on others. You have HDMI settings. Location data, so you can set it up where the camera will pick up GPS data either from your phone, I believe, or from various GPS attachments which you can put on the camera. Then you have your Wi-Fi settings. This is where you turn Wi-Fi on or off for the camera. And then you just have some useless marketing stuff. And then we have the retouch menu, which just has a bunch of in-camera photo editing stuff. I really don't use this stuff. I guess if you wanted to edit your RAW files in camera, or do some stuff to your JPEGs in camera, because you wanted to send them off by your smartphone, so you didn't have to edit them on your smartphone, I guess you could use that. And this is my personal favorite, the My menu, where you can put your most used or useful features that you want to change quickly and often. And you can just add or remove items as you choose. So that's about all there is to say. This menu can also be set to recent settings. I always use the My menu because I want to be able to get at these settings regularly without interruption. Hope you found that helpful.